not? Okay. Hi. My name is Mike Goldsmith. Welcome to Follow the Drupal Brick Road. This is going to be largely a kind of a old man screaming at the sky kind of talk. So I'm going to be giving a historical perspective of Drupal over the last 20 years. So for the people that have been here, how many people have been using Drupal less than a year? Okay, 1 to 2 years? 2 to 5? 5 to 10? More than 10? Okay, 10 to 15? More than 15? Anyone more than 20? Okay, I'm at about like 19 and change years here. So, you know, like I come from like, you know, the Drupal 4.3, 4.4 days.
4.7.
4.7.
Alright, so let's see, how is this?
But really got neck deep in 6.
Yeah. Alright, so this is my company, Platypus Media. Where I'm an IT consulting firm. We do all kinds of networking and hardware, you know, software, process engineering, security consulting. I do physical pen testing, which means I get paid to break into buildings. You'd be surprised at like what you can get away with if you just hold a clipboard. I'll tell you that. I've also been doing Drupal for almost 20 years now, and I also do media production, video production, all kinds of. You know, if you plug it in, the light turns on. I do it. My name is Mike Goldsmith. I said I've been working with Drupal for close to 20 years now. You know, we got a couple of old cats here. You know, back when having your UID was kind of a pissing contest as to who had the most street cred. I think like Drupal's well over like 10 million users now. You know, like, you know, for some of us, you know, like my UID is in the 5-figure range, in the low 5 figures, so which means that I'm a dinosaur. Some of I started working with Drupal. My first job out of college, you know, I was, you know, doing my master's degree and I needed a job, and I saw an ad in, you know, on Craigslist, you know, to be a copywriter for a nonprofit in New York City called the Children's Aid Society. They do community, community centers and things like that. And I said, sure, you know, I'm a good writer, you know, whatever. And they looked at my resume and they said, oh, you know how to program. I was studying to be a DBA at the time, and I was like, well, I kind of padded that on my resume, but sure. And they said, good, you're gonna find us, you're gonna build us a new website. I said, what? And they said, yeah, go find us a new CMS. I said, what's a CMS? And they said, I don't know, go figure it out. And so I had to, you know, I went through a bunch of different like CMSs, and this is about 2005, 2006, you know, and no one really had any idea what that was at the time, because a lot of websites, you know, either had proprietary CMSs, which were awful and extremely expensive, or websites were still being, you know, coded with flat pages. You know, or they kind of had their own kind of like in-house proprietary system, and that usually was, you know, very, you know, sketchy and problematic in and of itself. So I looked at like Joomla, and yeah, remember Joomla? Joomla's still around. Mm-hmm. I was surprised by that one. I found that one out the other day. You know, like WordPress, things like Website Baker. Anyone ever heard of that one? No. Yeah, no, it was awful. And eventually I found Drupal, and that's what I've made a career on for the last, you know, 20 years. You know, for moving from Children's Aid, I worked for Sony BMG, where, anyone here from Lullabot? No? Okay. So Lullabot and myself and a couple of other people built a system and maintained a system for Sony BMG to provision sites for the various artists on the record labels that they own. You may have heard of some of the artists whom I built the websites for. Ozzy Osbourne, Michael Jackson, Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Tori Amos. I built about 50 websites for them and maintained their server farm of 23 servers, or 23 web servers, 7 database servers, and a bunch of like load balancers and firewalls and other fun stuff like that. So when I look at Drupal, I always kind of see it in a system for large amounts of websites, not just like I've got a blog. I always look at it from a kind of a larger perspective. I also do a lot of work with Ager 3, which is a provisioning and maintenance system for managing websites. I do a lot of e-commerce work, networking, process engineering, and all that stuff. So today, what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Drupal. Why does it matter? How has it kind of evolved over time? Who it's for, and there's a bit of a disparity between some of the user groups and how we kind of see it, and then how we kind of interact with Drupal at whatever level we're at. And where is Drupal, where's it come from, where's it going, and have we taken the right path to get there? And I don't say that's necessarily all been good. So, from humble beginnings, Drupal started by Dries Buytaert in 2001. It was meant to be the system of just kind of how he could talk with his friends in his dorm room. And contrary to belief, he is not Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. I wanted to find the most embarrassing picture of him that I could. I found a picture of him when he was 7, and I was like, maybe that's a little too far. So Drupal started to pick up some traction, aside from just what some college kids were using in their dorms, with Howard Dean. And okay, so there's a couple people here are old enough to remember who Howard Dean is.
Yeah.
I know a developer that worked on that.
Oh wow, that's fantastic. So Howard Dean, he was the governor of, was it Vermont, New Hampshire, one of those. And he basically had this kind of loose network of kind of grassroots, websites that kind of all kind of promoted, him to in his running. A lot of local I can speak English today. Advocacy groups. I haven't had enough coffee. Later, this was branched to Civic Space, but that's kind of what started Drupal and gave it its kind of push, especially in the United States, giving it its popularity. So the way so back in the day, for Drupal was very, very simple to install. You just kind of had a web server, you had your Apache, MySQL, PHP. You just kind of threw it up there. It was very, very loose in what it would allow. It just was what was available. And you just, normally you would have something like PHP MyAdmin, where you can just kind of have a UI for your database. You just make a user, throw it in into the install screen, and you were done. And that was it. It's very, very simple, easy to use. You're off to the races without much of a problem. And because you have to remember that the core demographics for who this was designed for, small community groups, nonprofits, universities, people who didn't have huge IT departments, they didn't have huge budgets to hire people for multiple really hundreds of dollars an hour. Very, very grassroots system. And and that was really great, for a long time. And that was the way things were. And I remember a lot of the older kind of community groups. I was one of the founders of the New York Drupal group. And there was 10 of us there. And that was the only 10 people in New York City who knew anything about Drupal. And it was everyone was from a nonprofit. Now, when we hit Drupal 4, this is kind of where I kind of come into the story. I wasn't around before Drupal 4, and I'd love to see if I can find anyone who came in before that. Aside from Dries and 3 people who are still around. This was a major turning point for how Drupal was structured. I remember do you guys remember CCK, right? Okay. So before CCK, before we had fields, when you wanted to create a new content type, you had to write a full module for it. There was no dynamic content types at all. You had to write a full module for it. Kind of sucked. CCK came out, and that was the first kind of taste of being able to create content types dynamically. And that really, like, that added a lot of functionality, and it made Drupal a lot easier to use for a lot of people. Because, like, again, a lot of the core demographics of Drupal weren't programmers. Then views came out, and panels came out, and ctools, and like that just broke people's heads. Just being able to actually like store a query and to have like a listing of like of content that wasn't just the default like node page. And then we also had like a lot of templating tools too. Back in like an older version of views, if you wanted to be able to create a template, for a particular field or for a particular view or content type, you can go into that and it would like show you the overrides, and you would just kind of click into that link and it would give you like the exact name of what the template would be. And you would click into that, and it would kind of give you an example of it. You copy, you paste that, and you kind of make your tweaks, and then you kind of like just throw that into your theme, and you were done. It made theming so easy, as opposed to like what we had before, which was not much of anything. And then as it started to get bigger and more and added functionality, then big money started to look at it. And and I was part of the problem for this. I after I left Children's Aid, I worked for Sony, and this was one of the first kind of big money interests looking at Drupal, and where they can start to afford people charging $100 an hour, and they just threw like a bunch of money at Lullabot, and like Sony they just hired anyone that they could that they needed to work on that. This was a massive set of sites that they had. We had over 20 million unique users per day, and this is in 2006 numbers. So 20 million people like a day today. I mean, still that's sure that's a lot, but it's not nearly what that was in 20 million users 20 years ago. That's helpful. So that's where we kind of like start to seeing like a shift. And Drupal 5 and Drupal 6 started coming out, and then we started getting like a lot of like corporate backing, and that's that I think it's kind of allowed there to be kind of a shift in mentality, like from what Drupal was to kind of like where it was going. And then we hit Drupal 7. And this is the big thing for Drupal, where this is a major turning point, where we start to see fields in core, and it's made things a lot easier, where you could just dynamically create your own content types how you wanted to. And with that, we also had some things that I tend to disagree with. We implemented Drush. And this was like the first major reliance on having to use the command line. And again, this is where I start to see the beginning of the end here, like in my opinion, because again, these are people who they weren't programmers, and now they are forced to learn new technologies. Like they have to be comfortable in a Linux shell, and that scared a lot of people. For people like us, we made a lot of money, like being able to do that, and then that was great for us then. We added a lot of there was a lot of functionality that was added with Drush, which was great. But it created this dependency on developers, and we because we're comfortable getting being able to deep in the nuts and bolts of it, but it's not so great for non-technical users. And then we get like Drupal 8, which nobody talks about. Like we don't talk about Drupal 8 because Drupal 8 is just awful. And then 9 and 10. But again, we started adding more and more third-party dependencies. We started adding Symfony, Composer, Ansible, these are all these different technologies that just made things a lot more complicated. And then we started seeing a bunch of different increases in PHP requirements, where going from 7 to 8 wasn't a big deal, 8 to 9 was kind of a big deal, 9 to 10 wasn't a big deal. But getting off, this is why so many people have difficulty getting off of Drupal 7, is because there's a big switch in there's a line where with PHP requirements where it's a lot more difficult to kind of shift from that when you have to kind of just kind of upgrade not just your Drupal install, but you also have to manage that with the PHP updates. And we started to see a lot of kind of backwards compatibility where it was a lot easier to kind of bring things forward. And also, Drupal 7, a lot of the modules got, since we used Drupal 7 for such a long time without kind of, really kind of moving forward before that, a lot of the contributed modules got abandoned. I had one site that I managed that I was terrified. It was this a very big forum site, and I had a lot of advanced forum modules, none of which got updated past Drupal 7, and so I was well, none of my site's going to entirely break if I try to go off of Drupal 7. So I avoided that as long as possible. So over time, these numbers are a little deceptive. Back in the Drupal 4 days, less than 1% of all sites on the internet were Drupal sites. When we got 5 and 6, we kind of broke 1%. When we hit 7, 3% of all websites on the internet were Drupal sites. Now, when we go through 8 through 10, we drop to between 1 and 2%. And with all those Drupal 7 sites are still there, but why did our market share drop so much? It's because there was so many more sites got added, but they weren't using Drupal. We lost a lot of the momentum that we had using Drupal 7. There was a large increase in corporate enterprise websites, and because of these additional because of these additional requirements that a lot of grassroots people and non-technical people couldn't really follow, we lost a lot of smaller community sites. And people want to have very, very simple sites with very low barriers to entry. We have things like Wix and Squarespace now, which flatten the learning curve. They make it very, very simple to go in, make a site, and start making money. Like Shopify, Square, WooCommerce, Etsy. It makes it stupid simple to be able to put your content up on the web, and we tend to double down on making things harder, making the learning curve steeper. We're almost gatekeeping for ourselves. And I don't think that's necessarily the right way to have gone about this. Because it's abandoning a lot of new users. Back in the day, you have people had very minimal technical skills. We have to, in order to have a Drupal site, you need a dev team, and you're working on largely enterprise level stuff. And a lot of these third-party dependencies are deterring people. Not everyone's comfortable mucking around in a Linux shell. So I think that's stopping new users from trying Drupal. It's so much harder to start that. We all know that Drupal is much more powerful than any other platform, that's out there. But that also works, to our detriment, insofar that you can almost do too much with it, and it's very intimidating. So you have that kind of initial learning curve where you have to learn to think in Drupal terms. You know, and first you have to kind of like understand how to get it installed. You know, and even before like adding in Drush and Symphony and all and Composer and all that, like you had to, and then you had to kind of figure out kind of how to get it installed, how to think in Drupal terms and how to make it work, and then before you can even start to think about theming and then future development and to make things more complex. Whereas a lot of these other competitor sites, they make things very like they started at that level of flattening a learning curve, making things stupid simple. Like sure it doesn't have as much functionality, but you can still do what you need to do, and with very minimal technical knowledge. So, as developers, I think like software development and website development, especially for Drupal, is like philosophy. It's long-winded, tail-chasing mental masturbation. And we've kind of looked at this from the perspective that we're building cool stuff that we know how to use, but we're losing perspective as to who's going to be using the site afterwards. And this is a really great graphic that I found that, like we've got a couple like Drupal developers here that we look at the site and we're like, yeah, it's great, we love it, we can do all this stuff. And then you look at it from the user's perspective, and that's what you see. I mean, so to someone who doesn't understand the nuts and bolts of how cool Drush is, how cool Composer is, you're just seeing a lot of assholes. So like here's kind of a little use case that I like to give people. Dave owns a sandwich shop. Dave needs a website, for his business. He can't afford, $1,000 to hire someone like me to build it for him. He doesn't have the time or interest to become a programmer himself. He just wants to make sandwiches and have a website. Can he use Drupal? No. It's important that we as developers, we as the people who maintain and build Drupal itself, we have to build for the lowest common denominator. We have to we have to make sure that Dave, who just wants to have a website for his business, can just do that.
Sorry, so I'm like a little bit younger in the Drupal community. Can you give me an example like what Dave would have done in like prior to Drupal 7? Because I just came in Drupal 7. So like, yeah, what would he have done in like 5 or 6?
Well, like when I mean, even with Drupal 7, you can still like just download the Drupal core. You have like there's a bit of a learning curve to it still, which was still a little bit steeper than most. And I'm gonna get a little bit more into like hosted for solutions versus non in a minute. But you would just download it, you throw it onto your web server, and it works. You go to example.com/install, and it does its thing. It was a lot simpler of a process than having to do everything on the command line, which you didn't have to do that because that was just how you did things. Then it was just they tried to make it easy as possible for the widest number of users. Things like WordPress that like if you go to make a WordPress, yes, you can download it, but they also had like a hosted solution where they say point your URL at here, and then they took care of the installation itself. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in a minute. But there's a fine line between that we have to tread between making things like easier for users and still maintaining the functionality that we have and the portability that we have. Because the problem with hosted solutions is that you're hosted there and you're not it's like having like a Spotify account. You cancel your Spotify account, you lost all your music, right? So like that's kind of the problem with a hosted solution. So we have to kind of maintain sort of a balance with that. And that's one of the great things of Drupal is that it was portable. that you could just kind of grab a new install and just put it on a new web server and just that took a little bit more knowledge to do, but like just to kind of get something running, being able to throw the code just on a web server and then just saying go to install and it would install it for you itself was reasonable. It wasn't asking too much, at least in my opinion. Like when you start to have to ask people to like use command line, that's where one things can get dangerous, and that's where because you don't want to give Dave like root access. That's bad. But you don't want to you don't want to make it too hard, but you don't want to make it too easy either. Or we need to make it a little at least a little bit more challenging so that people don't break things. Does that answer your question? I guess. Okay.
How
So.
how many folks in here remember Drupal Gardens? Yeah, that I think we might have done ourselves a disservice by moving away from that
Mm-hmm.
in terms of
Agreed.
getting entry adopters. Drupal Gardens wasn't the solution for everyone, but for the smaller folks that were wanting to spin up a site and not necessarily maintain the hosting, not have to be a command line expert, you could build a pretty decent Drupal site on Drupal Gardens.
Yeah.
And then when you outgrew Drupal Gardens, you could export it and take it to a
Take it with
self-hosted
you.
solution.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this stuff, it was like top down though. Drees was like pushing ambitious digital experiences, but Dave doesn't want an ambitious, he just wants to sell his sandwiches.
Exactly.
And yeah, I totally agree. That was, in my opinion, going the wrong way. It was all the best technical reasons to make some of these changes.
Oh yeah, it added a lot of functionality. It added a lot of like cool things that we could do. But again, it's like the parents with the mobile. It's what does the end user see? And it just has a lot of developers like looking like assholes. So some of the pain points that we've had to do, also adding like modules and other and functionality, having to maintain it all, upgrade paths where I've always been a pain in the ass. And some of these dependencies, I will never forgive Composer. I hate me some Composer. I get what it does. I appreciate the functionality, but fuck you, Composer.
Yeah.
Because I'm a multi-site guy, and here's where I have to call a little bit of bullshit. Because there's been talk that we're abandoning multi-site. No, we're not. Multi-site still works in Drupal. That hasn't changed. But Composer won't let me put my modules where I want them to go. This is a very, very this is problematic. It's changed with the Drupal 9 and 10 with where modules are, but for the sake of argument, we've always had sites all modules, and that's where you would put a module, and any site that in your multi-site installation would have access to that. You also had more granular access to if you wanted to have a specific module that was only accessible by one site, you put it in the site name modules. And prior to using Composer, you can move them. You can put whatever module you want where you want it. You could have different versions in one site versus another one in another one, and as long as you maintained it yourself, you had the ability to do that. You had that control over it. Composer does not let you do that. It will. You could say where you want all of your modules to go, and that's it. I'm sorry, Composer. I know where I want to put my modules, and you're not the boss of me. And but it's something that has that Composer does not have the ability to do, to have that granular control of say, I want to put this module here, which is the simplest thing to do, but because we don't control Composer, they're like, no, screw you, And we can't fix this, so we've been forced to abandon multi-site when this was a core functionality that we had for years and years and years, and it's something that still works, but it's just something that we don't that Composer just kind of breaks,
So,
by default.
but isn't it fair to say, like, we're not forced to abandon multi-site entirely, it just removes that ability to run different versions of the same modules for different sites within that multi-site?
Yeah.
No. It's so like let's say I have a Drupal 10 installed, and I have 2 sites on it. One, I have an e-commerce site, so I've got Drupal Commerce like that I want to run on that, and I've got like a media site on another one. So I want to use the same code base. I if I don't want my media site to have access to all of to Drupal Commerce, which is a huge suite of modules and takes up a lot of space. It's very bloated. And I don't want to have my end users even have the ability, for whatever reason. I don't even want that to show up in their modules list. So you would have to kind of separate that out. But with Composer, you can't.
There's also the possibility that you might have dependencies for those 2 sites where their
Conflicting.
sub-dependencies are in conflict, and you couldn't do that.
Right. So you're somewhat limited in, because you have to put all your modules in one place.
Yeah.
It breaks your ability to maintain the different sets of modules because of that. The only other solution is to actually have an entirely different install of Drupal, but now you got to maintain 2 code bases. Which was one of the beautiful things about multi-site is that you got one code base for all your sites, and it was hell when you had to upgrade 20 sites at once, but that was what you did, and we had the ability to do that, and only maintain have one code base, which sure, hard drive space on servers is cheap now it is, but I want to have one system. I don't want to have 20 different systems.
I was just going to say, I just still feel like it's overstating to say we have to completely abandon multi-site. I agree that it has the ability, but there are still sites today that are running thousands of sites in a multi-site configuration in Drupal 10 or 11. So
sure,
it's not like that ability has gone away. But yes.
No, but it breaks some of the ability to make them more granular, because a lot of those people who have 1,000 sites, they're very similar sites.
Sure.
You lose the ability to have very disparate sites. Having a multimedia site versus an e-commerce site versus where your functionality is vastly different. For example, when I worked for Sony, right? Britney's, all of our artists' websites, like Britney Spears' website. We had all these content types, and we had a lot of custom modules that were written to allow us to create, the discographies, for for all of her albums and all the track listings and all the media side stuff for that, versus, I have. Another site that I worked on, is it's a website for a phone sex site for a phone sex company, where I've done a lot of the outside facing part of that site is kind of one thing, but a lot of what I did and the important stuff, the meat and potatoes of it, is actually the kind of the intranet site, where a lot of that's very data driven, with very heavy use of web forms, where I automated a lot of the processes that the company was using, and that allowed them to be more efficient with their company. Those are 2 vastly different sites with totally different sets of modules that that you would have possible dependency problems with. So no, it doesn't completely break it, but it kind of cuts it off at the knees, in that you have to kind of balance, and kind of you have to basically have all of your contributed modules all in the same place. Now you could still use the site name, with like modules, like folder for custom modules. Oh, another thing. Also, if you want to use like a particular theme and you want to make customizations to a theme, that's another problem, because we would have sites all themes. And then site name theme. And if you wanted to use the same theme, you can't. Because you would have like one change that, like a change that you would make for one site, and then, but for another site, like you would pick up those changes from that. So you still need to have that granular, ability to kind of change things, which is why you would use the more granular folders for that. And if you're grabbing the like a contributed theme through Composer, it puts it all in the same spot. So you can't have multiple copies of that theme. It just doesn't. It kind of overwrites it, and then you're screwed.
Probably want a sub theme anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to give you kind of general use case, issues with that. Okay, so one of the I definitely see that there's been a lot of pullback, because I think a lot of people agree with me that there's been this kind of movement towards complexity, and that's not been a good thing, And I think Drupal CMS theoretically, it kind of comes to our rescue with this, because it's meant to be this very low level, easy to use. Grassroots, very, very, very simplified, and I hate to say almost dumbed down, but way for people who are non-technical to use Drupal. You like using AI and recipes, and that's great, but Drupal CMS, in order to leverage the recipes and the AI tools, you still have to set it up, which takes a lot of that more technical knowledge. So it kind of defeats the purpose of giving, of using something that simplifies things if it's so complex to set it up for the simplified user. Yes.
So the first time I tried out Drupal CMS, it was a process of downloading an archive, extracting it, and then launching DDEV. So it sounds very similar to what you talked about earlier as the earlier Drupal experience where you download an archive and then upload it to some kind of a hosting environment, no?
Well, yeah, it is. But, explain getting DDEV set up to, to Dave in a sandwich shop. It's one thing when, you would have, WAMP, back in the day. Or MAMP if you're a Mac user, where it was program, click install, it popped up literally your doc folder, unzip into there, and then you were done. Whereas DDEV, is a lot more, it kind of has a lot more tendrils that you kind of have to deal with. It's not quite. I don't even have DDEV running on my machine. I've not been able to figure it out. But and also if you want to have, even if you want to have it, running on a server, you still gotta get it set up there, which is, again, it's a command line thing, whereas, versus just before, if you went to Google or we went to GoDaddy and get a free, web hosting thing, again, interface, they just popped up the interface, you just drag and drop your files, and it makes it's a lot simpler than that, but with Drupal CMS, because also we used to do downloading the archive and kind of putting it in DDEV, that's great, but the concept behind Drupal CMS, in my opinion, is more geared towards something like a hosted solution. And here's where I start to yell at the sky.
No.
So, again, Drupal has always been, a grassroots thing. It's always been, we always had this, free as in beer. That was kind of like our battle cry. That it was free. It was always going to be free. It was open source. Anyone can use it. And it wasn't about the money. And now you have, okay, try this new simplified thing. And the best way to do it, you see, companies like Acquia who are like, try this new easy system and we'll host it for you for a price. And that's where, like it gets a little distasteful for me, because that's not how we used to do things. That's not that's against kind of one of our core values. That it's that this isn't, this is moving away. Yes, it simplifies things back for easier for users again, but it seems to me like it's almost like a money grab, and that it kind of leaves a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. So I get what they're trying to do, but I think the way that they're going about it is problematic.
So you're calling this a money grab, but going again back to the Drupal 5 days, wow. you could get the website for free, but where would it be hosted?
Well, yeah, but I mean, people went in they went and got their own web hosts, and they had free hosting options, and you can still get free web hosting. It sucks, but we had Angelfire and
GoDaddy
and GoDaddy has free options. No, I mean, if you have a website where you're getting 1 million hits a day, something like that is not going to cut it. And you need a little bit more of a robust solution for that. And you have to kind of you got to spend a little money at that point. But it's more and even if you do have to have a paid solution, it's your choice as to where. You would put where you would host it versus the kind of what I've seen with the launch of Drupal CMS is it's host it on our servers and pay us money, and it's I don't know. Do you understand kind of what I'm kind of getting at? With that,
I understand what you're getting at, but I feel like the longer term intent of Drupal CMS is more towards a Drupal Gardens, where it's going to be more of the entry level, you can spin that up, geared towards that small to mid-market type of customer, but we just haven't seen those announced yet because there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be different for that type of use case where people are running updates in production, where people
Actually, I was just about to bring that up. I just found Drupal Forge, which I think is kind of the antithesis to that kind of money grab model where it's where they have that you can try any of these you want. You can build a site on that if you could do it within 6 hours. And then you can export it, which I think is great.
Get it out.
And so at least kind of gives you kind of like a starting point. I just messed with it a little bit last night, so I don't really know too much about it yet, but I'm sure you're right. That the long term goal is to kind of make it easier for for the masses. But it's one of those things that the way that they were doing the launch, it just seemed a little smarmy to me. Kind of a lot of the literature that they were putting out, in how to get it running, and if you just want to try it, try it on our servers, here's our hosting packages, and that just kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. I do see that it is in the long term, yes, it's definitely a better solution. I just personally don't like how they kind of phrase things. One of those phrasing, kind of problems. You have a question over here? No? All right. I think that the idea is to kind of bring balance to this, to where we need to balance function and form. It's great that we have new technologies that are coming out that are going to add more functionality, but we can't lose sight of Dave. It's also important that that we maintain our core values. And hopefully that's where things like Drupal CMS are going to go. Where they're going to, where it'll kind of pull back a little bit. I've heard rumors that that I haven't substantiated yet, but I've heard rumblings, and as much as I would like to, I don't know how much I trust that. It would be nice. But there's, I hear little bits and pieces of corporate gossip, and that's, we'll have to see. I would like to be cautiously optimistic, and so I kind of want to put a positive spin on the end of this, but that I do hope, I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. The things do kind of move back that way. And with things like Forge, I've got a lot of hope with that. I have a lot of hope with that. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting, thing that I need. I'm actually thinking of setting up a meeting, to have a much more in-depth conversation about Drupal Forge, at offline with this. But I hope something like that really, really takes off. So that's kind of where we are. Anyone have any questions, comments, quid pro quos? Yes.
The thing that I keep seeing more and more now is that, and I don't understand why, other than some VP somewhere making a decision, there are more corporations moving away from Drupal, and we know there's no license fees for the code and all this, but they're going to Adobe or Sitecore, and they're spending millions of dollars, and they're going to a system that's far older and behind Drupal. And I don't know, is it a sales thing? Is it a marketing? Why do people have such a bad taste of Drupal in their mouth at the corporate level? That's my question.
Oh, I could answer that one.
Are they afraid of open source? Are we?
No. It's not.
What's the?
It's not that they're afraid of open source. It's that getting talent who can handle what they've fucked up over the last X number of years. That's hard. It's hard to find really good. There are a lot of people who'll be like, oh yeah, I could do Drupal, but they don't know their ass from their elbow. And when you got so you all have heard the term "don't hack core." I was one of the people who coined that phrase. I actually used to have don'thackcore.org. But because you used to that was just what people did. It was back in early really early Drupal 4 days. We hacked core all the time. It was bad. Because we didn't have the coding standards that we did. When you started to get a lot of more corporate interest, you had a lot of outsourced work that was done. When I worked at Lifetime, I managed 2 teams of programmers. I had an in-house team, which is guys who were local in New York, and I had a team in Bangalore. And here's the thing about Indian programmers. They are very good at writing code that functions how you tell them. It'll do what you tell them to do. How they get there, they don't care about the coding standards. They don't care about what your intent is. They says like they say they take what you say very literally, and they will find whatever path, to get there that they can. Which is why I used to compete with against outsourced coders all the time, and I said, look, they're very good at writing the code right. I'm very good at writing the right code, and there's a difference there. And when you have a site that has gone through years and years and years of them getting the code right, but not necessarily the right code, and there's all kinds of hacky things that they've done, and this isn't the best way to do it, and then you have to hire someone because people move on in jobs, and then you have to hire someone to kind of untangle it all. It's a daunting task. I would always say to people who I was bidding for jobs on, I said, yeah, you can hire me for $100 an hour now, or you can, hire a Boom Hospita Penelam, for $15. But in 6 months, when you're pissed off at him, and you come back to me, I'm going to charge you $200 an hour to undo what he did. Because it is a lot harder to do that, and you can't just rebuild, 10 years worth of content on a site that's got a million hits a day, right? When I picked up the Lifetime site and managing that, there was a massive amount of content that was there. They were putting up 10, 20 articles a day, on this massive site with I think they had 3 million hits a day. And again, this is 2006, 2007, or not 2008, but still, it's hard to maintain that talent, and for someone who's gonna be that good, they charge a lot of money, and it's easier to be well, let's just kind of move to this platform because they know and trust the name Adobe, even if the product that they offer is not as good. Because prior to starting working with Drupal, did you understand the word taxonomy? Had you ever had to use that in context? No, you didn't, because it was a language that you had to learn for Drupal. There was concepts of thought that you had to pick up and learn to think in Drupal terms, and that's very difficult for a lot of people who haven't been doing it for a long time. So I think that scares a lot of business speak people who have maybe have talked to a good programmer and got a bunch of word salad thrown at them that they I don't know what any of that means. And Adobe says, make a new page. Tag your content. Not create a taxonomy vocabulary. And they're what the fuck does that mean? So I think that that's probably one of the larger problems that why people are moving away from Drupal. Because the corporate higher ups, they've been doing this for years. Now they're taking a look at it at the site, and they're wait, I don't understand any of this. And we need to hire someone. How do I know, if I'm hiring someone who knows what they're talking about? That's my opinion. So, I hope that answers your question. With that, I think we're actually running over a little bit. Anyone else have any other questions, comments, quid pro quos? All right, great. Well, you guys have been a fantastic audience. Thank you so much for coming here. This is the last class of the day. I appreciate you sticking around and listening to me babble for an hour. All right, so thank you guys so much.